This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from Burger King, Buffalo Wild Wings, KFC, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a burger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
You're listening to the Animation Addicts Podcast, episode 339. Interview with the filmmakers behind the Disney Plus documentary, Not Just a Goof.
Welcome to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, the #1 place to get your animation fix with animation addicts just like you. Each episode, we dive into the wonderful world of animation featuring Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, and everything in between. From hilarious discussions and movie reviews to interviews with industry insiders, this show's mission is to brighten your day through our love of animation. So hop on your nerdy couch, grab some snacks, and get ready to hang out with your animation besties because it's time to dive into today's episode.
Hello there, animation addicts. I'm your host, Morgan Stradling, and I have a very special treat for you today. Coming up on April 7th is the 30th anniversary of a Goofy movie, which just blows my mind that it's been 30 years since that film came out. And to celebrate the release, there is a new documentary that's being released on Disney Plus on April 7th, so on the actual 30th anniversary. It's called Not Just a Goof. And what this is your classic behind-the-scenes making-of documentary. It's an hour and a half, and it really tells the story of how this ragtag group of animators and filmmakers were able to bring this cult classic to life. So I had the opportunity to interview the filmmakers of Not Just a Goof. So we have Kevin Lima, who is the original director of A Goofy Movie. You also might know him from directing Tarzan and Enchanted. And then the 2 filmmakers of Not Just a Goof are Christopher Ninness and Eric Kimelton. And this is a really, really fun interview. We talk about how the 3 of them ended up meeting, how this documentary came to be. Then we dive into A Goofy Movie and a lot of the different struggles and obstacles that the team of A Goofy Movie faced when they were making the film. So this is a really, really fun interview. So buckle up. Let's head on the open road to go eye to eye with the filmmakers of Not Just a Goof.
Uh-oh, the last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hear that? It's SpringFest savings calling your name. Only at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a Select Ego trimmer, blower, or mower. Plus, get your choice of any 2 bags of Miracle-Gro organic soil mix for only $16. Shop these can't-miss deals in-store or online today. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Excludes Hawaii.
All right, we are here with the filmmakers of the new movie, Not Just a Goof, which comes out on Disney Plus April 7th. So we are excited to introduce Christopher Ninness, Eric Kimelton, and Kevin Lima. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here. Thank you for having us on.
So this movie, what it is about, it's a behind-the-scenes documentary about the making of a Goofy movie. And it comes out on the 30th anniversary to the date that a Goofy movie was released. And this is, so before we get started, just talk about how this film came to be and what, like, each one of you, where you came along the way, how you guys all got synced up.
Yeah. Well, Eric and I and Kevin met back in 2010. That's when we all three connected. I mean, Eric and Kevin have Kevin.
Yeah, we met way before that, Chris.
but like in my world, the three of us connected. Kevin was at Warner Brothers working on a project, and Eric was tasked with finding some possible interns to come work doing miscellaneous kind of tasks for Kevin. And I was graciously invited to come be part of that internship. And we met back then, and I think I immediately gushed to Kevin about my feelings on a Goofy movie and how much that film means to me. And he was really generous enough to kind of keep in touch through the years occasionally. And if there was a screening of a Goofy movie, he would send along an invite, and he sent me a poster at some point, which was really wonderful. And he was very friendly to me. And obviously Eric is his nephew, and they see each other all the time, holidays and whatnot. But during 2020, Disney Plus had just launched, and one of the programs they launched with was Into the Unknown, the making of Frozen 2. And Eric and I had watched that. We love behind-the-scenes documentaries. Don Hahn's film, Waking Sleeping Beauty, was really a North Star for us. His Howard Ashman documentary. And Into the Unknown was this fascinating look behind the curtain of Disney, which we were really obsessed with. And we kind of looked at each other and said, I wish this existed for our favorite Disney movie. Why doesn't it? And then we kind of had this realization, well, maybe we could do that. Maybe we could make this happen. We know Kevin. Maybe he's willing to go on camera and do, maybe it's a YouTube short. We had really no idea what it would be, but we knew the fandom behind a Goofy movie was really growing into something, really mind-blowing. The cultural impact of the Goofy movie was fairly known at this point. If you talk to people know it's considered a cult classic. And we thought, well, that's a great entry point into a talking head documentary. Let's make a movie about the fandom. And Kevin was hesitant, honestly, at first, I think.
They gave me a proposal, right? They had a full written proposal for what this thing was going to be. And I just looked at them and said, are you sure about this? I mean, this is going to be a lot of work. Do you really want to invest in something like this? And also, you guys don't own the material, right? Yeah. So once you make it, what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
But once we kind of told them, well, we don't care. We still want to make it. Let's just see what happens.
Which really spoke to me, because I'll tell you, most of my career has been, I don't care. I'm going to do it. So I said, all right. Let's see what this could be.
So how did you end up getting connected with Don Hahn? Because obviously he's, like you mentioned, been involved with a lot of Disney, obviously a Disney legend, but then he's been involved in a lot of these documentaries about Disney films and great people that have been involved in Disney. And so getting him on your side was a big win for this and probably helped get it to where it is now. So can you talk about how he got involved?
Yeah, we called
my friend.
Yeah.
Good to know people, right?
It sure is.
Yeah, but Dom was great. I mean, it took 2 to 3 years of like putting this film together, and like us getting it to a point where we felt comfortable with the world and other people seeing it for what it is, and like what we were trying to go for with it. And that's when Kevin passed a screener over to Don, and luckily
he loved it.
Yeah.
Well, it helps that A Goofy Movie is Don Hahn's daughter's favorite Disney film. She likes it more than The Lion King, and Don produced The Lion King. So that helped too, that his daughter was really, really into it. And I think am I wrong? Did she watch it with him?
Yeah, we did get to show it to her as well, which was really cool and surreal.
So Don really believed in the movie and believed in the guys, and took it on.
And so what I think is the best Disney Plus content, for me, Disney Plus ideally would be the place for the digital Disney Vault. Everything that's ever been produced, that's your one-stop shop for that. But then also it's the place where you can find all the behind the scenes content, featurettes, things that you would typically find on the old VHSs and DVDs that they just really don't make a lot anymore because the market has shifted. But I remember, there was a Sleeping Beauty VHS, and at the very end of the movie, if you stuck around, there was a making of the film. And I, as a child, ate those up. I loved whenever they would give us little trailers that had unfinished footage or, just making of featurettes. That's the first thing I would watch whenever I eventually got DVDs and Blu-rays. And then that was a bigger part of it. So this seems like a perfect place for this to be housed. So with Disney Plus, what challenges were there trying to get it ultimately across the finish line? Was Don ultimately the person able to do that?
Yes, we called Don our fairy dog father. There's so many different like departments or sides of Disney that need to help sign off on a film, and when you have Don Hahn like opening the door and entering the room with you, there's a level of like trust and respect. And Don is one of the nicest people I've ever met as well. And like people genuinely like him. So I think honestly, just the fact that Don was there gave us some credence and some credibility. And he's obviously worked for Disney for years. He's a literal Disney legend, and he knows who to talk to, and it's invaluable.
Yeah. So talking about the production, first off, I'm very impressed with Kevin's organization of all of his artifacts and memorabilia. It's all stored perfectly nicely and categorized. The Disney Archives will be proud.
Yeah, they're going to come knocking on my door soon. I have this thing's going to come out, and I'm going to get a little like, hey, we want our stuff.
So with that, talk about the process of combing through all the materials for making a documentary like this. There's so much that you could share, and obviously you have limited amount of time. So where do you start? Do you each kind of go through the material separately? Do you sit together and you watch it? Or talk more about making a documentary and where you're going to take the story.
Well, because everything's on literal high-8 tapes and VHS tapes, you have to watch it in real time to digitize it. So that's the first viewing, is just kind of trying to watch it all. And then I think Eric and I watched every single tape at least 4 or 5 times all the way through. I mean, it's because you don't want to miss anything.
The French art direction films all the way through, did you?
Well, okay, so there's some tapes that maybe
I did.
Speed.
You watched a 4-hour art direction.
I watched every second of it, because one thing that we did when we were going through the tapes, because there's literally so much, there's like 100 hours or more of stuff to go through. So when we were going through it, like we made notes and like logged all the tapes. So like when we were editing later on, we could like search like Kevin Campbell in the booth and see where all of it was, almost like a database of stuff. So when we had an idea about like, oh, this would be great for this scene, we knew exactly on the tapes where to go.
And so much of the editing process, the very first scene we cut together, my favorite scene in a Goofy movie is the Hi Dad soup scene. And when I found Kevin talking about that scene, and then we find the footage that's, the storyboards of the scene, that's where I started talking to Eric, like, okay, I think we should just start editing almost like sections of things we want in the movie. Maybe we don't know how they fit yet, but then that's like part of the process of combing through the footage is you start creating all these sequences with, oh, this would be great for the Hi Dad soup thing. Look at Kevin's talking about it. You sort of cut something together. There's like a general edit of that. And then you cast that off to the side and you're like, hopefully we can come back to that and that makes sense to put in the movie. Who knows? And you do that with every single tape. I think the first cut of our movie was close to 2 hours. And now it's under, it's just under 90 minutes. So you really, it's a lot of shaping and trimming it down and figuring out what services our story. And then through that process, a lot of the footage, doesn't get used, or things you think are important maybe aren't. You're repeating yourself. We learned we were doing a few times. So,
and then it also inspires you guys. If I remember us talking about an early cut of the movie, and they showed it to me, and I said, "Hey, I think there's a bigger story here. I think you guys need to put yourselves in the film," because they weren't originally in it. And I said, "You've both expressed stories of connection to this material, and I think the more personal it is, the more interesting it'll be." And so they went out and did some soul searching and figured out if they first wanted to be in the movie, and then second, how they would achieve that.
Yeah, I thought that was a great bookend to open and close the movie and to really tie it all together, because boiled down to its essence, a Goofy movie is a story about a father and son and the challenges that they experience as the son is growing up. And so including that really hit home that a Goofy movie is something different, something special, that it wasn't just a movie that we, did check. It was a paycheck and off you go. You did something else. It was something that was made a difference in people's lives. So Kevin, can you talk about that? After the film was released, it just had, just this impact on people that was very probably unexpected. I know that when I would watch it, I remember seeing it in the theaters with my family. We would watch the VHS all the time. We would repeat scenes and laugh and giggle about it and listen to the songs in the car. We loved this movie. And then I would talk to other people and they had similar experiences. And then you broaden out and years go by, and it seems everyone seems to have connected with this movie in when you thought it was just your own little movie that you and your family, had because it was one of the VHSs you owned. So can you talk about how you kind of realized that this was bigger than initial what it seemed?
Yeah, at first I thought it was just going to disappear. I thought it was going to be one of those movies that would just sort of fade into the background, and that the movies I went on to make or was moving on to make would be the movies that people sort of audiences respond to. And audiences have responded to those movies, but not in the same way I think that they've connected to this movie. I think there's a whole generation of kids who saw that movie in 1995 or thereabouts, who brought the movie home, like you were saying, on VHS tape, watched it over and over and over again, and then grew up and had their own kids. And then they wanted to share the movies they loved when they were young with their kids. So there's this whole sort of generational circle that happens with the movie. And the movie is about that generational circle, right? Parents and children. And then I think what else happened was social media, right? Is that this generation that loved the movie were suddenly sort of talking about things online. And this became one of the things they started talking about. And it just grew from there. In the studio, I had no idea either. I remember going to or watching the D23 celebration, and I was told they had to turn away like 400 people. And Tevin Campbell sang, and suddenly it's online, and everyone's going crazy. And that became kind of the beginning of it. Oh, wait a minute, there's something happening here. And then I went to a screening at the El Capitan, and it was like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where the audience was like talking back to the movie and singing and dancing around. And I just couldn't believe it. And I realized, oh, this is big. This is something. So it just kept growing and growing, and it just keeps growing. To my amazement, right? It is the movie that most people talk to me about.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that make you feel? I mean, initially it kind of seemed like a dud as far as doing in the box office and how the less fanfare that it had for its release. And here it is 30 years later.
30 years later.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I can imagine how you would have felt, and you talk about that in the documentary, being a bit disappointed with the release.
Yeah.
And so how has that changed over time and your perception of the film? And
it's completely flipped, right? It's completely flipped for me as being something I thought would be invisible to being something that is the most present in my life of these films. And now this documentary gets made, right? Which takes this whole thing to a whole nother level. I would have never guessed that this would be happening. I mean, I'm so grateful. I even look at something like the Atlanta episode. I don't know if you know about that, but there was a episode of Atlanta where they created this mock documentary about how a Goofy movie was made. And it was just sort of shocking to me at first. Nobody told me about it. Nobody told me it was coming. I just saw it when it streamed, and I was like, wait a minute. This I was kind of like upset at first about it. I was like, I made this movie. But then I realized at the end of it that the Goofy movie has become so much bigger than me and the movie. Right now, a whole other community is using it to talk about themselves and to talk about how they fit into the world, right? And that was kind of remarkable, just remarkable for me.
So during this time, in Disney animation, obviously it was the Disney Renaissance, and it seemed that Pocahontas was the A team in Disney animation, and then everyone else kind of was on the B team with The Lion King, and obviously we know what happened with each of those films and their impact. But
we were the D team.
It must have felt like you were the C or the D team, and definitely in the minors, right? Yes. So. And obviously you weren't in Disney feature animation. You were in like Disney Toon Studios and Disney Television. So how were you able to take that, knowing that, hey, obviously the priority is here, but we're here. So how do you take what you have, smaller budget, there's a team that's in a different area of the world. And what's your mindset going about creating a movie and making it happen?
Yeah, for me, it was an opportunity to make a film, to make a different kind of film, right? I mean, Disney feature animation was making those big fairy tales and, talking animal movies with lots of scope. And this became a way to tell a different kind of story. And I said, well, why don't we do something totally different? Why don't we do something contemporary, do something set in our contemporary world? Let's use contemporary music to tell that story. And maybe tell something that feels sort of at its core, kind of what was, what goes on in our everyday life, right? Let's talk about, let's make a John Hughes movie. Is what I said aloud at the time. Let's make that kind of movie on this kind of budget and see where we end up.
Yeah, we reviewed this on the podcast in episode 30 long ago, and we have a little subtitle for it, and we called it "It's So 90s." But we mean that in the best of way, because you made this contemporary film, but it doesn't feel dated. And so it just feels kind of timeless in a way, but it still has all these elements of the 90s, like the clothing and the music, and the 8-track tape, lots of little remnants, right? Pay-per-view, these things that are just great. So does that come into consideration when you're making a film like this? Okay, we're setting it kind of in a modern time, but we don't want to include things that might make it seem super dated, or are you just kind of ignoring that and just making the movie?
With this movie, we just grabbed a hold of the time we were living in, right? We just said, okay, how do we make this for people today? A little microcosm of what people use and have in their everyday life. Mm-hmm. I think maybe when you're dealing on the bigger budget scale, especially at Disney, you had to think more about that. Mm-hmm. I think that's why they tend to lean towards fairy tales, because they're evergreen, right? They never date. But I think we wanted to take just a different approach.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, and you didn't talk about it in the movie, but I noticed in some of the storyboards that Max is much younger, more like the Goof Troop version of him. Can you talk about why you ended up maybe making him older, high school age? And I think that's the key, because that really is a pivotal point in people's lives where no longer is the family the main focus for the child, but it's the friends. And yeah.
It's exactly that, Morgan. So we sort of looked at, when in your life do you start to separate from your family and move towards friends instead of parents? And we decided that it was during your high school years, and that we had the opportunity to take a step with the characters. The TV show was about him I think he's in middle school, right? And now we sort of move up to high school so we can deal with the issues of parents and children at that age. And the characters can talk about that, right? You can present that sort of dynamic. And it was something we had to really thread, because I remember we showed the movie to a test audience at one point, and parents were upset that there was a scene in which Max yelled at Goofy after the Possum Park scene. And parents were like, I don't want that in my Disney movie. And we had to say, we just had to fight back and say, but it is honest. It's what happens at that age. And without it, you don't have the conflict of the movie, and it lessens the resolution of the film. So it was about, okay, how do we embrace this conflict that happens between parents and kids, and, tell a story about coming out through the other side.
Yeah. One thing that I really enjoyed was the animations that were included. And so, a lot of times with movies like this, just due to the budget, you're kind of going to have more just still shots of almost like an animatic in a way, or just a storyboard, just because that's all that you have money for. But what I really thought made this special was the hand-drawn animation. So can you talk a little bit more about why you wanted to incorporate those, and ultimately choosing the studio that you did?
Yeah. So we knew really early on that we didn't have, we were getting these really wonderful stories from everybody that didn't have B-roll coverage from the tapes Kevin had provided. But we knew we wanted to include these stories. They're dramatic and really some of them are just mind-blowing behind the scenes stories. And so we thought, well, animation feels like the natural way to do this. So that was an early conversation that we really landed on. We ended up going with a studio in Colombia named Ventura Animation Studios, and they really understood what we wanted to try to do, and they really ran with it. They are the ones that came up with the idea of setting our behind the scenes animations in kind of this goofy universe, making everyone dogs. What does Kevin look like as a dog in the Goofy verse, which were really fun conversations to have. And the other part of it too, just for Eric and I, working with a studio in Colombia felt like a really natural way for us to maybe have a slightly similar experience that Kevin had making a Goofy movie, which helped us make the documentary. Something that we really strived for was, how do we make our documentary feel internally how we felt watching a Goofy movie. A Goofy movie is so deeply emotionally rich, and we wanted our documentary to have a similar feeling. We want you to walk away feeling like you've just had the best warm hug, and we thought the animation was a great way to do that, and working with a studio in kind of a similar way that Kevin was working with studios in Australia or Paris or Toronto, felt like a really natural way to kind of maybe experience a little bit of what they went through. Obviously, a little. We didn't have to put ourselves on tapes and mail them off at UPS or but yeah.
I thought that was just one of the most fascinating parts of the whole behind the scenes, is that you had these dailies essentially that you would record on VHS and you would mail over and then get the feedback and repeat that every single day. Can you talk a little bit more about that process? Because that's I mean, now it seems like, oh yeah, we're going to hop on a Zoom call and make it happen.
Yeah.
But there was so much effort that had to go into this. And then you had a timeline, I imagine, that at what point did you get a release date? Yeah. So talk about working with a studio overseas.
Well, it was 1995, right? Or 93, 94 when we were making the movie. And there was no such thing as this, what we're doing now, right? So we had to figure out how to do it. And the only way that I could think about doing it with a studio overseas, I eventually went to Paris, and I was there for about 9-10 months. But until then, they had started animating, and I needed to figure out how to give them direction. And I did think, I don't speak French, so what can I do? And I thought, I'm just going to act it out for them. So I took the storyboards and I acted out every single frame and talked about the emotional content of the scenes. And that's where all these VHS tapes came from. And then we'd put them in a pouch, we'd make a copy, put it in a pouch and put it in the mail. And a couple of days later, I'd get on the telephone with them and they'd ask me questions. And as much as we could, I just sort of explained where I was at, or I said, let me make another tape. And I'd make another tape and send it off. And that was just the way we did it then. I mean, when I went over and did Tarzan, we had taken a step, right? There was video conferencing at that point. Mm-hmm. And Paris was working on the movie. And we would just get in front of the camera like this and act it out. So tapes don't really exist of those handoffs. So we just these guys got really lucky that all that material existed and that I kept it.
Yeah.
Along with every single camera that I recorded the material on. So at one point I just gave them everything and said, here, go. I really don't remember. I haven't looked at this in 25 years. Maybe there's something here you could use.
Yeah.
And now, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Now when you're doing animation with a studio in Colombia, that you can like in real time watch animation and draw on the image and exchange notes. Yeah. I can't even imagine, Kevin, that's such a crazy process. Yeah.
Was there ever a time where the language barrier, it just did not translate, or because you were able to act it out, it was able to get what you needed?
It always ended up that way. So if we'd start out trying to talk to each other and like, if there wasn't a translator around when someone had a question or I'd looked at a scene, boy, we would just figure it out. It became pantomime, right? I'd be like, just like giving them a sense of the characters. There's a lot of times when I watch this movie where it kind of freaks me out just a little bit because I see myself in Max, especially expressions I make and like, wow, they really just used that straight from the videotape, like rolling my eyes or, chuffing, which the French love to do, like so that's a little strange sometimes to watch. But I did try to, we're actors. First, animators are actors. They create the physical performance of a character. So taking that on was easy for me. And communicating with another animator is easy because you can put yourself in the place of the character and act it out if you need be.
So it was during the Disney Renaissance, obviously, Jeffrey Katzenberg was a big part of it. And he had a lot on his plate that he was doing, but he was very involved with this film. And he was very much a champion for a Goofy movie. And it was really heartbreaking in the film when he leaves. I mean, you feel as if we're part of the team, like, no, we need Jeffrey, even though, he was going to push back and maybe change things. And there was obviously disagreements that happened, but ultimately, like, Jeffrey was really important to it. And was he ever involved in this? Was there ever, and I thought it would have been interesting to see him talk about it after the fact, to give his perspective. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jeffrey.
I don't think Jeffrey knows about the film yet, but we which will be interesting to see what he thinks. But we did discuss, potentially interviewing him, obviously through Kevin and Don and other people. We could make that connection, but our film is very much about like the ragtag team of it all, like Kevin and Brian Pimentel and Greg. They're all first timers to their roles. And, you know, we kind of felt like maybe adding Jeffrey in as in an interview, it might like push it more towards like, because he's such a huge like known figure in especially during that time that they kind of weigh it more towards that. We wanted to really focus on the, you know, the scrappy young kids that are trying to make the best film possible.
I love that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel that's really portrayed in the film about the team and how they were just the little engine that could. Mm-hmm. So one thing in the film was the black spot on the film reels. That is like made my heart just break. It reminds me there's a story in Pixar of the lost Toy Story 2 files that ended up deleting 90% of the movie or a version of the movie, right? And it's gone on to become this big thing. I'm like, why do we not know about the black spot? I feel like this is an equal level of that. So, but you say it's a blessing and ended up being a blessing in disguise because you got a little bit more time. So you talk about just how you felt when that happened. Well, you do talk about it in the film, but ultimately, what extra wiggle room did that give you? What did you end up working on that maybe you wouldn't have if that wouldn't have happened?
Well, we were spread across. I mean, we didn't know how we were going to finish. We had a release date in November of 1994, and we were just strapped. We didn't know how we were going to get there. We were talking about, do we cut sequences? But we were working across many different sequences at the time. So can we cut out shots? What can we do? And then the black spot was found, burnt out pixel on the monitor we were recording from. And we were upset. Everyone was upset because we had to go back and basically reshoot the entire movie. But at the same time, it gave us some leeway to actually finish the movie the way that we wanted it to be, what we wanted the movie to be. So it absolutely was a blessing and a curse at the same exact time. I don't know what would have changed really if we had made that first release date. Maybe some marketing would have been different. Some of that would have happened that ultimately didn't happen. Maybe the movie would have been compromised a little bit, but not a lot. It wasn't like we were going to cut big sequences out of the film. But it was sort of it was a 5-alarm fire at the time, figuring out, going through all of the footage to figure out, was there anything that we didn't have to reshoot? Or did we have to go back into everything? The other thing we could have done is we could have released the movie with a black spot.
Yeah.
Right? We could have done that. I wonder if anybody really would have noticed. But the integrity of the film was important to us.
Yeah. So let's talk about the release. Because that was,
please, no, not that.
You're working so hard on this and everything's climbing and having seen the impact that it has, it just kind of is released with a thud, and Disney, doesn't put the effort into it that, you were expecting. Talk about your emotions with that. And
it was disappointing. It was not only disappointing from the way in which the studio reacted to the movie. Your protector, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was truly attempting to make a cheaper animated film. Was there a way to make a movie at a price point and still have it be of a certain quality? And that's why Jeffrey constantly pushed emotion, because I think he did think that that's what people would be. That's what the audiences would connect to. If they weren't going to get this high level of polish, they would respond to the emotional quality of the film. He was right about that. And so when we didn't get a release, a big release, we were disappointed. And the movie critically didn't do well either. I mean, the pushback against the film critically was harsh. So we just sort of thought we were done, right? We thought, okay, we hopefully this will be a building block, a stepping stone to what we do next. And it was that, I went on to direct Tarzan, so it did work in my favor for that. but we kind of just all looked at it as like, all right, we put in a huge amount of effort, but it's going to live over here and be one of the forgotten films.
So what lessons did you take from this film and apply to your other films that you directed and projects along the way? Because I'm sure it was this was your first time directing, and a lot good and bad happened. So what did you apply to future films that
well, I went to Disney. I went to Disney Feature Animation after this movie, so I went on to Tarzan. And you have a whole support system in that branch of the studio, right? They're a monolith. There's so much support. But I was this little scrappy guy who wanted to make, I have a vision. I want to make it my way. So I did have to learn to work well with others, to come in and say, all right, this is a team of people making a movie. Hold on to the vision when you need the vision to prevail, but really sort of learn how to collaborate in a different way. That was one of the things I took away from it. The other lesson I didn't learn till much later, which was basically don't make a movie unless you have some passion for it, unless you have something to say. So with Tarzan, there was definitely something to say. I really connected to it in many of the same ways I connected to a Goofy movie. There are thematic qualities that cross over, fathers and sons being one of them. So I did learn how important it was to find yourself in the movie, even if you're being assigned to the movie.
So with switching gears to the fan, we've talked a little bit, but when you're including it in the film for the documentary, the fan aspect, I mean, you could have a film entirely just on the phenomenon that has become a Goofy movie. So where do you take the story? Where do you cut? I think obviously what was included was amazing. And where, you mentioned there were about 30 minutes that you did cut. So let's talk about that.
Well, the 30 minutes that we cut was little bits from everywhere. And that really came down to, Kevin's saying the same thing in this scene, and we're just repeating ourselves, and we think we can make the film a little tighter. And, when you're making an independent film like this, Eric and I could have potentially left it to be 2 hours long if we wanted to, but we had made a pact with each other to really listen to these incredible people that we're getting to, tell a story about and take their advice and listen to them. Sometimes we push back on Kevin. There was a couple times we pushed back on his notes, maybe. But for the most part, we would go back to the edit and go, Kevin's right. Like, I think we are repeating ourselves, or Don has this idea, and I think he's right. Yeah, that was a really great experience for us. And the fan section you're absolutely right. I mean, we could have made a feature film completely just focused on the fans, and it's almost.
We started it thinking it would be that way, that this was going to be a film about the fandom, but it wasn't until we found that, treasure chest of VHS tapes from Kevin that we were like, oh, this is for the fandom. But still wanted to definitely shine a spotlight of like why this has resonated so much culturally.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, where it is now. Disney kind of ignored this film, but now they have obviously panels for it. They have merchandise. You see people wearing, Powerline World Tour 1995 T-shirts around the parks, and
there's Powerline Max at Disney parks now.
At the 90s night Power, not just Max, which would be shocking, alone, but Powerline Max. I mean, that goes, and people are running to him because of what he means in the film, which is just really cool. So let's talk about Powerline, because one thing as you're developing this film, there's so much that you could do. So it ends up being like a buddy comedy and road trip movie, and it has this big climax at the end of the concert. And so different. It's so unique. It's really fun. All these moments pay off at the end. I'm thinking of the one moment where Roxanne sees him on the screen and she's kind of hugging her knees, and it's just a big payoff. So can you talk a little bit more about that scene? Because I love the behind the scenes features that you have, footage that you had of the dance. Disney released something like that for Hercules a few years ago, where they had a side-by-side of the live action reference of the Muses, and then what ended up being the final version. And it went crazy on the internet. I'm just shocked that Disney hasn't done this for a Goofy movie, because once I saw that, I was like, I have to rewatch this scene because I just love those dances are incredible. So let's talk
they
about
didn't know they had
end.
the footage, right? Because it all is locked in my basement.
That's true.
No,
Disney,
it's like
Disney will be knocking.
With any of those types of sequences, you try to support your animation team as much as you can, right? You can't expect, 15 animators to come up with a dance sequence. So you try to support them. So we shot all that footage. We did color scripts. We're figuring out all the lighting. How does all of this work together? And I think one of the great things in the doc is how the guys were able to layer all of that material together to create this sort of, it just lifts you when that sequence comes on, and all the new pieces, Tevin singing in the booth, the dance choreography, the rough animation all comes together to the whole time you're seeing like a little snippets of the actual film. So you're able to put it all together visually, which I think is really exciting. I remember when I took the box out and they discovered that these tapes existed, and that specifically, guys, you can talk about this, but they found I originally told them I had a cassette of Eye to Eye. So I probably had a demo cassette of Eye to Eye. And they were thrilled about that. But then...
Yeah, when you pull out a tape that says Eye to Eye live action reference, your brain like explodes with possibility. Like, what does that even mean? And then you see the footage, and I think Eric and I looked at each other. We're like, does anyone know that this is how they did that? Like, and to see how accurate the animation is to the dancers. It's almost all 1-to-1.
That's why we did split screen, because it was so spot on that it's like you just have to put it up there to like really put a point on it that this was based in like reality and like a actual person doing this. Like the choreographer, the person that was like in the live action reference as Powerline was like the choreographer for Janet Jackson for like the Rhythm Nation tour and like her music videos and stuff. So you have this, extremely talented artist and person that is like
creating the perfect cast, right?
Yeah, there you go.
and then you get to see Tevin in the booth, and that's like another tape that blew our minds, because we all love Tevin Campbell. Powerline is so iconic, and he's such a huge part of that. And to see him as he's so young when he's doing that.
I think he was 17.
Wow.
Yeah, and to hear David Z talk about the story of like he recorded the whole thing in like 2 or 3 takes. It just boggles the mind that it can just be like that simple. Your brain is like, no, this is much more. Like, he had to have been recording for weeks, and like and you're like, oh, he's just that talented. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. So this is being released on the 30th anniversary. Was that always the goal, to release it on the 30th anniversary of the film?
No. We've been working on this for like 5 years since the conception of the idea of it. We were hoping like a year or two, but we started in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, so we had to navigate that, and then just the navigating through getting it to the right people and all that stuff. It's just has really been a process, but I think it's all, happened for a reason. I mean, the 30th anniversary is perfect.
I think it was interesting that when Don spoke to the executive at Disney Plus, one of the things that she wanted was documentaries about films that were having anniversaries.
Mm-hmm.
So those things came together in that moment. And Don said, well, I think I have something you might be interested in, and hands her this, and it all just fell right into place.
So is there a particular scene that stands out to you? Because obviously everyone has a different relationship with this film, from directing to having loved it and everything in between, right? So what is a scene from a Goofy movie that you go back to and means a lot to you?
My favorite scene has always been the hot tub scene. And I think it's because
they always put too much water in these things.
You have watched the movie, haven't you?
I can quote this movie all day long. It's so quotable.
I think because I was able to achieve something that I never thought I'd be able to do with this character, is to dig so deep into Goofy's soul and to have him express express human emotion, like deep human emotion, the disappointment that he hides in that moment, that he carries, is something that I never thought I'd be able to do or would even try to do with a movie like this. So it really, it is the scene that always comes to mind. Guys, do you have one?
I was just gonna say the High Dad soup scene for me. It's the point where Max and Goof are starting to connect, and their relationship is, really starting to change, and they're starting to understand each other, and that to me has always, no pun intended, stood out, and it just means so much to me, and the opportunity to get to give back to the scene by putting the scene in the dock together and hearing Kevin explain it and kind of direct the scene has meant so much to me. I feel like I'm a 35-year-old who's still learning from a Goofy movie, who it's like the greatest gift. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, like something that's separate from the father-son relationship aspect of a Goofy movie was there's the whole Max at school and trying to fit in and be cool. So I would say Max as Powerline at school for Stand Out really stood out. I remember they rolled in the big TV into my middle school, and we watched a Goofy movie in our classroom. And I remember I had just embarrassed myself a few days before. I fell down the bleachers in front of everybody. So I just felt like a complete goof. And then a few days later, they rolled in a Goofy movie, and Max is trying to be cool to the whole school, and then he fails, and I really connected with that.
Did everyone point at you and say, "Hey, it's the Goof kid"?
No, or maybe they were whispering it to one another behind my back.
No, it's just so great. It hits a lot of these elements of high school and relationships and friends and father son. I love that we get two different aspects of father and son. We have Goofy and Max, and Goofy's just being Goofy. He is himself, true and true. He's doing the mom buzz. He's trying to vacuum and just being a goof, right? And it's too much for Max, who's kind of moved on from that, right? And then we also see Pete and PJ and how he treats his son almost like a servant and a slave, and he's going to respect you under your thumb. And you see where one relationship is going and where the other one is going, and they're both going bad directions, and ultimately they're able to reverse course and come together. It's so great.
Maybe there should be a sequel about Pete and PJ.
Oh,
so we can see where that story.
Sign me up. More, yes. Rob Paulson and
Tim Cummings.
Tim Cummings. Yes, I mean, yes, I will love to have more of them in my life. So if you're ever looking for work and that comes up, I think that the fandom would really appreciate that. But so is there anything that you want people to take away from watching this film? You know, the big documentary about a making of the Goofy movie, this little engine that has become this big phenomenon, surprisingly, 30 years later. What do you want people to take away after watching?
Oh, there's so many answers we could give to that.
I think it's one of the things that Chris and I, were saying during the making of it, and like really seeing, because part of us making this is like why people connect to, a character like Goofy. So it's like, even like when you're a kid, it's a character as silly as Goofy can mean a lot and have a lasting impact. And I think that's important for especially kids to be able to express themselves. And I think this movie really shone a light on how it was growing up, especially in that time, and gave a voice to it. And we just want more of that.
Yeah. You don't know, there's a tremendous power of art, right? It's art matters. It's so important and crucial to our everyday lives. And you have no idea how the film you're making 30 years ago is going to affect a 5-year-old kid as he's watching it on VHS tape. And, I just think that's so important to encourage and to really, really develop and instill in everyone and to love. I think there's also a bit of a message in our doc to love the things you love, despite, the critics maybe weren't so kind to a Goofy movie, but millennials and others kind of said, no, we love this movie. It matters to us. And here's why. And I think that's a good lesson to remember as well.
What about you, Kevin?
Well, for me, I discover new things about it all the time, even 30 years later, right? And what I think is interesting about this movie at this moment in time is its ultimate thematic message that's in the Powerline song, right? Can we see each other eye to eye? Can we actually overcome our differences and figure out who we are as a community and embrace each other for who we are, right? Max has to learn to embrace his dad, who's a goof, and Goofy has to learn how to embrace his son, who is growing up and changing. It might not be, the person that he wants him to be or thinks he should be. And that the fact that they can come together and see eye to eye is a great message that we could all walk away with today.
I do have one last question that I've just thought of last minute. Embracing who you want to be and the Lester's Possum Park scene. How did that come to be? That is so bizarre and silly, and it's so funny. It's just, of course, there's a side of this road amusement park based on possums. How did that one come to be?
It just was us brainstorming about, roadside attractions. Where can they stop? And at one point, a sequence we cut from the film was that they went to a big amusement park that had roller coasters, and they had just been to Lester's, and across the street there was this huge amusement park. And Goofy gave that to Max as a counter to where he wanted to go. But we thought, okay, what is the crappiest roadside attraction we can think of? And we thought, well, maybe it's just like when you go and there are all these like stuffed taxidermied animals everywhere. And then we thought, and then we cut the amusement park section, and we thought, oh, this is our chance really to make fun of ourselves. And we can make it like Country Bear Jamboree, which I also always loved, that attraction. And that's what it became. It became a riff on Country Bear Jamboree made out of like garbage. Right. And I did the temp dialogue for it. So I was doing, hey, everyone. You know, I was doing that way back when I had a higher voice. Howdy, folks. And it was just funny. Everybody laughed. So we kept it as it was. And nobody made us cut it, which we were shocked.
Well, it's absolutely iconic. The movie, A Goofy Movie, is absolutely iconic. And I'm really excited for this documentary. It's called Not Just a Goof, and it's coming out April 7th. Thank you guys so much for all the work that you did on this, the original and this one, bringing this to the fans. I'm really excited for people to see this. So thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on.
You've been listening to the Animation Addicts podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to help spread the word, be sure to share the podcast with your friends on social media. Just don't forget to tag us at Rotoscopers on Instagram and use the hashtag AnimationAddicts. For all the links and full show notes for this episode, go to rotoscopers.com/podcast. Now, if you still can't get enough for your animation fix, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and visit rotoscopers.com for more animation news, reviews, and interviews. Thanks for listening.